again and welcome. Today I'm going to be turning a Pot-Pourri bowl with a lid and a finial, and I'm going to be turning the body and the lid from these bits of Spalted Beech, and I'm going to be using this piece of Conchalo Alves to do the finial. I'll be using the rubber truckee mounts here, which are specifically designed for this type of a turning. If you haven't got the rubber truckees, it's not a problem. You can merely put them between your spindle and a cup live center in your tailstock. Okay, without further ado, let's get turning this three-sided Pot-Pourri bowl. Okay, so I've got the blank mounted between the two rubber truckees, and the blank is actually just on 4.5 inches square, and to get the most even corners you want it as near as a cube as you can get it. And a good way to check is just to see how far away this corner is away from the tool rest and whether it's in line, which is pretty good there, and this one as well. It is just about as accurate as I can get it. So I'll be using a 3/8 bowl gouge, the Hope Cryo 3/8 bowl gouge, and the idea is that these corners here will be the tips of the sides, so we need to get this down, form a tenon on this end here, and then I'll put it in the chuck, hollow it out, and we'll proceed. So I'm turning at just 1250 RPM, and let's get started. Nice, easy cuts. Move away, looking at the ghosting on the other side. Okay, so I've got the shape of the outside that I'm looking for. Now I'm going to form a tenon here. Once I form that tenon, I will sand and finish the outside. There's a bit of punky wood here, which you would expect with Spalted Beech of this nature. Some beautiful figure, however. So I'll most probably give that a little douse of sanding sealer, let that dry off just to stiffen up the fibres a bit, and then sand it and hopefully get a nice finish. So we'll get on with that. I think it's important to mention that you can see from the surface here that there are areas which have more shine, which are the less punky areas, or no punky area there on those parts, and obviously the sanding sealer is going to remain on the surface. So it's important when you've made your application, give it 30 seconds to a minute to absorb what it's going to absorb, and then wipe the excess off, otherwise you'll get a build-up on the less porous surface. And you can put as many as you like on until you're satisfied that the porous area has drunk as much as it's going to. I just thought for the newer turner that's possibly an important point to make. I've done 3, I'll most probably do another 2 or 3 and wipe off the excess, and then hopefully the areas like this here, which are fairly punky, will be the fibres will be stiffened up and the sanding results should be better. So that's the outside of the bowl finished. Got a nice sheen on there and some beautiful figure. I'm not worried about the few pits around the very punky areas, because that's all part of the nature and character of this piece of wood. But all in all, it looks pretty good. So I'll just take this end bit off on the bandsaw, put it into the jaws of the chuck, and we'll start turning the inside of the bowl. Now the reason that I got such a long tenon here is that I'm using my cylinder jaws here, and I'm not going to go right to the edge. And because I've got it nice and parallel, I can leave about 1/4 inch there, and I'll just bring up the tailstock to make sure that I get it as central as I possibly can before I tighten, and just check here that's nice and running true. And the reason for that is it gives me a little area there to part off, and I'll obviously part down to a certain depth, and then I'll use the pull saw to detach it completely. So that's the inside of the bowl finished now. I put a slight mortise here on the inside so that the lid that we're going to turn will seat nicely on there. What remains to do now is to sand, which obviously will be quite a bit of hand sanding involved. Sanding sealer, Yorkshire grit, Hampshire sheen, and then the bowl part will be finished. All we have to do. So I've decided not to use the Gonzalo Alves. It was rather a big blank for a little, what essentially is just going to be a little knob on the top of the lid. So I found this offcut. I'm not sure what it is, to be honest. It's a hardwood, and I have a feeling it's Australian, but I had from Les Barker, but I really can't remember. However, I'm going to make a little knob out of that, about, I don't know, 1 inch, maybe a bit less than that in height. Put a tenon on it, and then I'll turn the lid. Okay, and the speed is around 1500 RPM, and I'm using a 3/8 spindle gouge. Now that represents the diameter of the lid. So what I'm going to do is just take this down to there and then fit it into the mortise and see if it fits nicely, and then I can play around with the design and put in the Pot-Pourri holes as well. Now this piece of Spalted Beech, which I'm going to use for the lid, is extremely punky. I've applied 6 coats of undiluted sanding sealer, allowed that to dry overnight actually, in the hope of strengthening the fibres and stiffening them a little bit, so I've got a chance of getting a half decent finish. At the end of the day, both these pieces are out of the firewood pile, and one's got to expect a bit of punkiness and not a perfectly smooth surface, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to bring this down now because this is the correct diameter that I'm wanting it to fit into the mortise. So I'm going to carry on turning this. I'm going to be turning at about 2,500 revs with a freshly sharpened spindle gouge on the lid part here, in the hope of getting the best surface I can. So I'm really pleased how that's turned out. Combination of a sharp tool, very slow traverse across the wood, high RPM, and indeed 6 dosings of undiluted sanding sealer, and we've got a pretty good surface there considering how punky it was, and yeah, I'm very pleased with that. So what I'll do now, I'll clean up the holes, sand those with a rod with some sandpaper on, and then apply sanding sealer again, Yorkshire grit, Hampshire sheen, glue the little knob on, part him off, and the job will be done. Well, that's the lid finished, and I'm really pleased how the surface has turned out. So what I'll do now is attach the knob in the middle with some medium CA glue, and then part off and clean up the back, and the job will be done. Well, here it is, a three-sided spalted beech Pot-Pourri bowl with an Australian hardwood knob, species unknown, but I'm pretty sure it was given to me by Les Barker, my old mate, when he came over from Oz a few years ago. Very pleased how the spalted beech turned out, considering how punky it was in the beginning. So I'm very pleased that I saved it from the burn pile. It stands at 4 inches tall and 6 inches across at the widest point, and all in all I'm very happy with it. I'll put some pictures up at the end. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers now.